Ronna Ambrose is out of the Conservative leadership race. The former interim leader of the party posted a message on Facebook just moments ago saying that she's struggled with the decision, but she's focused on her work in the private sector. The CBC's Hannah Thibodeau is, of course, following this race and following the developments with Miss Ambrose. Tell us a bit about the announcement and how much she struggled coming to it.
Yeah, absolutely. This came out just moments ago, and she's standing in the mountains of Alberta. She said that's one of the reasons why she made this decision, is that she really likes to be at home at this point. And as you say, she really struggled with this decision. This is something she said in the video, but it took her a bit longer. There was no real indication a lot of the times. Was she going to say yes? Was she going to say no? 1 minute we'd hear she'd be leaning more towards yes than no. So there was this big Ronna watch, really, every day, because a lot of people wanted the interim leader in. She's popular. She's from the West. A lot of people wanted a Westerner. They wanted a strong woman in the race. We have Marilyn Glado too, but they really thought that she could potentially take on Justin Trudeau and win in the next election. So electability as well. That was another big part of it. But if you look at how she came to this decision, she didn't say a lot of it in the video. She said she loves her private life right now. She loves what she's doing. She's enjoying the public sector. She's enjoying being back in Alberta. And also, you have to remember, she has a husband. She has 3 kids. She's enjoying all of this time she has right now. She said she loved the 13 years she had in public service. Remember, she served under Stephen Harper in cabinet posts as an interim leader. And a lot of people like Jason Kenney, as well as Brad Wall, the former premier of Saskatchewan, were pushing her to get in the race. They
former Prime Minister Harper, too.
And yeah, we also heard that former Prime Minister Stephen Harper was pushing her to get in the race. And a lot of people were, sort of hedging their bets, waiting to see if she was going to be in or not. And I'm just looking, I tweeted it out just moments ago, and you get a lot of reaction just on Twitter. There's one person saying, darn, even people who were out there in the party were hoping she was going to jump in.
I just want to interrupt you for a second because we had been trying to prepare the video that, as I told our viewers, was just released. I think it's ready now to play. So let's take a listen to Miss Ambrose in her own words describe why she won't be running for the Conservatives.
It is humbling to be considered at all, because I love our party, I love the people in it, and I love our country. I have really struggled with the decision to return to political life. I loved my 13 years in public service as an MP, a minister, and especially as leader of this great party. But right now, I'm focused on making a difference through the private sector, creating policy and advocating for our energy sector to create jobs. And my work continues to ensure that all judges in Canada receive sexual assault law training. And the truth is, I love being back in Alberta.
So that, once again, is Ronna Ambrose announcing via Facebook just a few minutes ago that she won't be running for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Talk a bit, Hannah, if you could, about the impact overall in the race. You talked about all the big names that were urging her to run, the anticipation that she might. So many people were even waiting to see if she ran, they would drop out of the race. So what kind of impact does this have?
Also, people who are supporting the people who are in now, who may be potentially going in, those teams were going, I'm going to wait and see if Ms. Ambrose gets in because I want to work for her if she gets in the race. Now, this frees up a lot of those people, but also it's the vote in the West. I had a chance to speak with former Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall, and he was really pushing her to go. But he said, well, if she doesn't, there are a couple other options that he saw out there. At that time, he said Jean Charest. Well, we know that's not happening anymore because he bowed out yesterday. And the reason for that was they were premiers together. But he also mentioned someone like Pierre Poilievre. He said he could be a voice for the West, and for a couple of reasons. His father is from Saskatchewan. He's Francophone Saskatchewan. And also that Pierre grew up in Calgary as well. So that's what he was thinking, but also the other candidates are going to want to be that voice for the West. So right now, if you look at who is going to be in the race, and we pretty much know at this point the big names. So there's Peter MacKay, former
I'm guessing is breathing a big sigh of relief at this very moment.
I bet you're right on that one.
Just a wild guess.
If he wants to give a quote on that, we'll take it.
We will, yeah.
Yeah, so he is going to make the official announcement. He's already tweeted out, I'm in, but he'll make the official announcement in Nova Scotia on Saturday. That's one of the people. Also, Marilyn Glado, who's an MP, she maybe not be well known, but she is an MP in the race. We just spoke about Pierre Poilievre. He's expected to make his announcement in the upcoming days. And then there's Erin O'Toole as well, and expect that sometime next week probably. But then there's all these other tier candidates that are putting their names in. Rick Peterson. Just today, we wrote about this. He just announced that he put his papers in. He also put his money in, the first 25,000. He's just trying to get the 1,000 signatures. He wanted to back Rona Ambrose, but he's now in the race as well. There's also people like Derek Sloan, who announced he's an MP, maybe not a very well-known MP as of yet. He just was recently elected. He's going to throw his name in. There's Bobby Singh, there's Richard DeCarey, and then Rudy Husney. So those are names that you may not recognize, but they're also people who are considering and saying they're in, but they have to make that official announcement.
Yeah, it's certainly now really taking shape, and it'll be interesting to see what the race looks like going forward without, as we've just reported, Rona Ambrose, who has said that she will not be a part of that CPC leadership race. Thanks, Hannah.
Quite welcome.
Appreciate all the information. The CBC's Hannah Thibodeau.
I have really struggled with the decision to return to political life. I loved my 13 years in public service as an MP, a minister, and especially as leader of this great party. But right now, I'm focused on making a difference through the private sector, creating policy and advocating for our energy sector to create jobs. And my work continues to ensure that all judges in Canada receive sexual assault law training. And the truth is, I love being back in Alberta.
One of the most anticipated decisions in the Conservative leadership race has now been made. Rona Ambrose, as you heard there, will not run to be the next Tory leader. Meanwhile, 3 others say that they are in. Richard DeCarey, Rick Peterson, and Derek Sloan are all signaling their intent to join the race to lead the Tories. Perhaps not familiar names yet. What impact will this widening field of contenders have on the race, and what can be read into the decisions by someone like Miss Ambrose to take a pass? Time for the Power Panel to weigh in Toronto. Vicky Machama, Culture, Society and Critical Race Editor at The Conversation. David Ertel, former Quebec Liberal Immigration and Environment Minister and Counsel at Fasken, joins us from Montreal. And next to me here in studio, Summa Strategies' Tim Powers, along with former NDP MP Matthew Dubé. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Tim, over to you
no,
first.
I'm not saying anything because they all got longer titles than I do. So
I know, that was a mouthful. Amazing that I didn't stumble over all of those. Let me start with you. Surprise, shock, dismay? What do you feel?
None of the above. Look, I think I mentioned it to you on air before. I had seen Rona and her husband JP in April at a public policy forum dinner, and I asked her then, are you missing politics? And she said, not in a bit. I'm happy. They're happy. She's given a lot, as she said, but didn't say it enough, I think. That's not her style, to public life. I think she's legitimately pleased to be back in Alberta. I think she likes the new path that she's on. I think this was probably, as she described it, a tough decision process.
There's a lot of pressure on her, right?
Listen, even as of this afternoon, I had activists saying, well, we're waiting to see what Rona's going to do. And I no doubt she and JP weighed that quite seriously. I think it's the best decision for her because, as she would know better than anybody, having been a leader, and Matt and David would appreciate this too, unless you're absolutely certain that no one can convince you from running, no matter what their logic is, you shouldn't run. And I think she was able to tell herself, look, there's lots of other things I want to do.
Stockwell Day put it a different way yesterday. He said, if you're not ready to be basically eaten up by your own party eventually, you really shouldn't.
Well, and look, you know what? I think it's unfortunate for the race. I think it would have been great to have both Rona and Mr. Scheer in it, because I think what's important for Conservatives in this race is to have a number of voices and a number of perspectives. However, I think there are still quality candidates in there. I think we have a tier one. You've heard me say this before with Peter. I think Erin O'Toole and Pierre Poilievre can quickly raise themselves up potentially as well. So it's shaping up to be a better race than it was. Could have been better, but people have to make decisions that are best for them.
Vicky, what do you think the overall impact on the race of both Ms. Ambrose's decision that she made today, or that she announced today, and Mr. Scheer's decision announced yesterday not to run has?
I mean, I think for the party, it still leaves them with the same set of questions that they had after the election. If Andrew Scheer wasn't the guy, then who is the leader of the party for the Conservatives? And with Rona Ambrose, I think you could say that people felt that there was a specific style and approach to her that was markedly different and one that was marketable to the party itself, but also to Canadians. And now they're still left with that question. You know, I think Peter MacKay and Erin O'Toole are standouts within the party, but whether they resonate on a larger field and can lead a party nationally, that is, I think, the question that they're still left with.
It's an interesting point, and it brings me back to something, David, I'm wondering what you think on what kinds of questions Conservatives will be asking themselves as they make this decision. Lots of panelists on the show have talked about the idea of electability, and that the key question for them is whether or not this next person will be able to beat Justin Trudeau. But then I get a ton of messages after people say that, saying that misses the mark. Actually, we want somebody who really represents our values, and electability is not going to be the only thing we're thinking about.
Well, honestly, I think it's a bit of both here, because on the one hand, what you're going to need is a message and a platform for all of Canada. What the last election showed us is that west of Ontario, the message worked, but in Ontario and Quebec, where most of the seats are, it just didn't work. So you need a message. And, you know, it's about the social conservatism question. It's about having also candidates that can resonate and be believable with this message, and at the same time can win those seats. Again, you don't have to beat necessarily Justin Trudeau in Quebec to form a government, but you have to win more than 10 seats. Same thing in Ontario. You have a good base west of Ontario, but you need a leader that can bring a message that can keep those seats and develop in Ontario and Quebec a credible message that goes beyond what Andrew Scheer couldn't do. So you need a bit of both here.
Matthew, is that going to be found in the same person? Like, is the person who can send that message and find that it resonates the same one as the one that will satisfy the membership when they're picking people that they think represent their own values?
Well, that's a good question, and I think that's why a lot of folks are probably disappointed that someone like Rona Ambrose isn't running, because you have that sort of quiet, almost managerial style, which is not, and I'm not saying that in a condescending way. It's just to say, as leader, she wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but through her work became the most impactful. And I think that's really what someone's looking for in a leader, I would imagine. And I think it's interesting, you talk about where you need to win. Stephen Harper won a majority without Quebec, much to my dismay as a Quebecer and a Quebec MP at the time, because we felt a little neglected. But beyond that, I think it's really up to each leadership candidate to make their pitch. Electability is a tough thing. I think the Conservatives have the same problem we sometimes have in the NDP, although to a lesser extent, which is to say electability can be a dirty word because it implies that you're selling something out, you're sacrificing some.
Well, that's what Conservatives and NDPs always criticize the Liberals for. I've read these messages saying the Liberals are the only ones who will kind of just focus on winning, as if that's a bad thing.
And then they elected Justin Trudeau, who didn't look like he had a chance of winning at the time, right? So ultimately, I think it's a dirty word, and I think that no one's ever going to say that that's what they're looking for, but it is. And I think that anyway, that's where we're at, and I think she was very electable. But you look at the background in her video where she is, and you can understand why she chose not to do it.
It is a beautiful province.
Well, it's not quite Newfoundland, Labrador. Couldn't see
Let's
Newfoundland
not get
and
into
Labrador
that
with all
kind
the
of
snow here.
yeah,
I don't want you to fall off your chair again.
Yeah.
But I think Vicky hit on something important, and I think the Conservative leadership candidates, or those who will be the leadership candidates, have to pay attention to this, that they have to use the leadership debate to show, look, again, the politicians here know you win leaderships first and foremost by appealing to the membership. If you don't do that, you can never be prime minister. But I think the exercise also has to be one of embracing some ideas and taking some risks. And that's going to be vital for the party, because if they are going to win, they have to break away a little bit from the Harper formula of, the 39 and sticking to tight coalitions. They need to look to expand. And I hope we'll see some ideas. I mean, I'll give Poilievre some credit. I think it was La Presse or someone was reporting, Toronto Star, Alex Boutillier, talking about what he's saying on the abortion debate and how he would handle it. Look, full credit to him for saying, I would allow a free vote, but I'd never support it. Andrew Scheer couldn't go that far. That's even a little bit of a change. That may make some people uncomfortable, but these are the things we should be hearing and seeing in this leadership race. So some of the questions that dogged Andrew Scheer about where he stood don't dog whoever wins this race.
How much do you anticipate, Vicky, that those kinds of questions will end up not dogging them once they become leader, but particularly dogging the sort of conversation around this leadership?
I mean, I think on the social issue, I think social conservatives are such a large portion of the conservative base that it can't be ignored. However, I think that answer needs to be very clear. I mean, the Pierre Poilievre example is really striking because right now, to the Toronto Star, he's saying that he would allow an MP to bring legislation, but he wouldn't allow a vote to pass. At the same time, he's actually saying the opposite thing in French. And so he's very Andrew Scheer-like. The answer is both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And so I think social conservatives are owed a clear answer. Even if a leader is going to say no votes on abortion, I think they deserve that answer from their leader.
Those questions are particularly going to be asked in Quebec, I imagine, David.
They're definitely going to be asked in Quebec, they're going to be asked in Ontario, and that's going to be the key. And those are going to be like the first questions asked of any candidate, because those are the questions that dogged Andrew Scheer throughout the campaign and sank the campaign, particularly in Quebec, but in parts of Ontario as well. And so if this candidate, whoever it is, all the candidates are going to have to answer that question first and foremost. And remember, 2 years ago, Maxime Bernier, who was way out right during the last campaign, came within a percentage point of becoming that party's leader. So when you're talking about the base, obviously you win with the base, totally right what Tim said, but at the same time, this base needs to understand that if it's going to carry the country, and I understand the past with what Stephen Harper was able to do, that was with a lot of seats in Ontario that aren't there right now.
And final word to you, Matthew, but on the point that David is making around the aspects of the base that are socially conservative, we are seeing some of those names we listed off the top. Many of them are actually saying they want to be the socially conservative candidate. They want to be the candidate for those, and they're lesser known, but they have a very specific message as well.
Yeah, and what I'll be intrigued to see, because last time we were talking about this, I mentioned that how much money they can raise and how many signatures they can get will demonstrate the resonance that these issues are going to have in this leadership race. So I'm curious to see if these people are running because of their own volition, or whether there's any incitement from others in the party that may think that they're good candidates for these particular issues. And I think their success in reaching those high benchmarks that the party has fixed will tell us a lot about the role that these issues are going to have. And I think, for someone like Pierre Poilievre, it's good to sort of get to that issue right now. I agree. I don't know if he's saying something different, but the emphasis is certainly different in French than in English.
What's the difference on the emphasis?
So I think the emphasis is on that he would not support it, whereas in English, the emphasis seems to be on the free vote and that the bills would be allowed. And I think, but to bring it up now, perhaps he feels as a way to sort of rip the Band-Aid off quickly and then move on to something else, and to get kudos with a certain part of the party that might want to hear what he has to say on that.
Bold, quick prediction for you. I suspect many of the people that are on the screen today that you've highlighted who are saying they're going to run are not going to be there come March 27th.
I thought you were going to tell us who was going to win.
March 27th, when they got to put down that $200,000 check.
And what's your prediction of who's going to win then?
Look, I think Peter obviously is in the lead, but it's a race, and he, of all people, knows it's going to be competitive, and he's not going to underestimate people like O'Toole and Poilievre, I suspect.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.